But speaking of tough players yourself, in the grand final, about carrying on, like how to promote a game, like you carried on after rupture and what was the injury that you had? What was it?
It was ruptured testicle.
Testicle. Like he follows football. Like imagining football, Ronaldo. Like he'd probably start crying for about 3 weeks. Do you know what I mean? He'd be crying for 3 weeks. He wouldn't even walk for about 4 months.
If I flicked you in the nuts now, it hurt for about half an hour.
Football, I don't know how many rolls they'd be doing. They'd probably roll on the pitch for about 3 months. You've done that and carried on playing. Do you know, like, I just think that's the best thing about rugby league, how tough the people are that play. Welcome to Your Round Podcast. Me, John Lebbon, Andy Ellis, and Super League legend Paul Wood. They always say there's no one in Super League, Paul, but these houses are pretty nice up to keep turning up in, aren't they?
Yeah, they're not bad, are they? Yeah, they're nice areas, decent areas,
yeah. It's, there's no money in Super League, you're definitely right there. You've just got to be a bit tight with your money, I think.
Growing up in Wigan, did you have any option but to play rugby league?
Me personally, I don't think I did. I was as a kid growing up. I never really. I didn't like education. I didn't like school. The only time I got excited is when it was a games lesson, and that was it. The only subject I really took interest in was history, and I still love history. I love going sightseeing and stuff and finding out where we've come from. So that interests me. But other than that, I have no interest whatsoever. So. For me, when I found rugby league, it was like, this is my get out clause. Because I know that I had this perception of myself that I was never going to really achieve much more if I was to go into a standard 9-to-5 job, really. I couldn't see myself doing that. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have any passion for anything else. So when I found rugby league, I was like, boom, I was obsessed with it, and all I ever wanted to be from that day was a rugby league player, and that was it.
I've never talked to a rugby league lad yet who said, honestly, I was really good at school and then I fancy playing rugby league. It's always the same thing, isn't it? It's always lads that I couldn't fit in at school, wasn't any good at school.
Working class backgrounds and things like that, like where education isn't really seen as a massive thing, because as you say, you're going to go and work on a building site or something like that. So it's either that kind of mundane, like labouring job, or it's you put it all into the sport, and it's all like it's very similar background.
It is, and the other thing as well. Obviously, we're growing up in Wigan. You had that amazing Wigan rugby league team of the 80s and the 90s who went on to win 10 Challenge Cups. So every single year, you go down to Wembley, you watch Wigan. At the time, in the early 90s, all the Wigan rugby players were driving around in sponsored cars, in the tracksuits, walking around Wigan Town Centre, and. I use this phrase all the time when I describe them, but they were like Hollywood superstars to us guys round here. So you used to see like Merton Afire and Henry Paul walking around Wigan Town Centre, and you're like, wow, I want to be these guys. This is what I want to be. So in a town like Wigan, and St Helens and Widnes, they've all had successful rugby league teams, and Warrington. Kids grow up and aspire to be these guys because they are big role models.
It's weird though, because that first time I went in Witherspoons, King Street, went in Witherspoons before I went King Street, and walked in, there was like 5 ex-Super League players in there, and because you're from like my age, you're like, oh my god, there's Chris Joyce there, and like I felt like my hands like, but do you look round here, there's that many players that are from here and live here. It's probably just an everyday thing.
It is. It is, and sometimes you take it for granted. I mean, Andy Gregory literally grew up a stone throw around here. Bill Ashurst, who rugby league legend in England and Australia, grew up around here as well. There's so many players come from this particular area in Wigan of Lower Ince. But yeah, and Wigan as a whole, there's so many great players come out of here. The likes of Sean Edwards, Sean Wayne, who's doing a great job coaching now. There's just tons of players come out of this town, and like myself, I never played for Wigan. I played for Warrington all my career, and there's other lads who have done the same. They've come from Wigan but played for other Super League clubs, and I think if rugby league wouldn't have been a full-time professional sport, then there would have been a lot bigger queue at the job centre in Wigan Town Centre.
How old were you when you thought I could make a career out of this? Because obviously everyone wants to be a football rugby player, but there must have been an age of like 14 when you got time for, I could maybe make a living out of this.
Yeah, I mean, so my dad was massive into martial arts. My dad was into karate, Thai boxing and stuff like that, and I did a lot of that stuff with him. So up until I was about 12, that's all I did. I just did my Thai boxing and my karate, and I loved it. I really did have a love for I think I have a love for contact sports really, and I still do. But when I was 12 and I went to high school, an old school teacher of mine called Mr. Butchall, Derek Butchall, he's well known in Wigan, and he's brought a lot of lads into rugby league, and they've gone on to have great careers. People like Sean Long, Mike Forshaw, who played for Bradford Bulls. There's an endless list. But cut a long story short, he got me into playing rugby. And I loved the physical side of it, you know, and I didn't have any skill. I just liked the tackling, and I just liked getting the ball and running as hard as I could. Within about 2 or 3 months of playing my first school game, I got picked for Wigan Town team. So my teacher, Mr. Butchall, always encouraged me to play. He didn't really need to encourage me because I loved it. I loved it from the get-go, but he encouraged me, and there were times where I got too big for my boots, and he'd pull me down a peg or two, and he'd say, "Luke, I rate you. You can do something with your life. You can do something with it and make a career out of this." You know, and he'd had enough experience to know that, you know, which players were, you know, could do something within the game. And he's a great coach. He learned me a lot. So I think from the age of 12, getting picked for Wigan Town team, it was like, this is brilliant. I love this. I'm good at it. I'm getting some recognition for it. And, you know, maybe I can, you know, have a career in it. I watch Wigan Rugby religiously, see, so I just like, I want to do that.
What age did the club start looking at you? What time, like, sort of age did Warrington send a scout to come and watch you play and things like that?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of my mates signed when they was like 14, 15, but I was a bit later. I was 16, which at that time it was considered a late age, really, because like going back to probably 95, 6, 7 and 8, if you'd not signed when you were 13 and 14, it was like you'd never sign, because they was trying to grab kids from a really, really young age. Like Wigan signed a player called Davil Lacey when he was 12 years of age. So a lot of people were thinking, oh, if I don't sign by the time I'm 16, I'll never play professional rugby. But I got to the age of 16 and I'd not signed. Now, I got told a story that Wigan was watching me play, and they thought I was a good player, but they never thought I was big enough. Warrington, I was training at St Helens for a couple of weeks before Warrington came, and I was in this house, no mobile phone. My house phone rang, and a guy called Jim Reader, who was the Warrington Wolves scout, rang me up and said, "We want to sign you." And I said, "Well, I'm training at St Helens at the minute, and I want to give it a couple more weeks to see what they say, give me some feedback." And he said, "Well, we want you to sign a contract like this week." So I had a think about it, and I drove over to the Wilderspool Stadium with my old coach John Taylor, who was my amateur coach, and my stepdad, and me, Mark Gleeson, and Dave Olstead drove over, and we signed contracts when we were 16. So we did all sign late, because a lot of lads in our team signed when they were like 13, 14, but so a little bit later for me.
You don't have a clue at that age, though, do you? When you're 16 and that, if they said, "We're going to give you a tracksuit," you'd be like, "Yeah, that'll do." Do you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing in your... I remember when I was like 16, like, not bothered about the money, like, I just want to get that tracksuit, and you're walking around town, aren't you? Like, "Oh, look at this."
Mate, honestly, that was me down to a T. If they'd have given me a tracksuit, I'd have signed, you know what I mean? But I was... because all I wanted to do was put like a Super League tracksuit on and walk around and say, "I'm playing professional rugby now, or I've signed professional contract." And I did for a while. I did do that. But then, you know, the more hunger comes in, because you're involved in a professional club, and then you get even more starstruck. You're a young academy lad, you stood in a gym, and then the first team come in, you know what I mean? And you're like, wow. I was a skinny kid when I was 16. I was like, I think I signed for Warrington when I was 12 and a half, and I remember Darryl Vandervelde saying to me, "Luke, we've signed you because we think your game, you know, you get stuck in and you do a lot of the stuff that we, you know, value as a player, but you're not big enough yet, so you really need to go away and work on your size." And unfortunately, he's passed away now, Paul Derbyshire, about 9 years ago, but he was my first academy coach, and he was like really good in pushing us in training, and he really like helped me in the gym and said, "Luke, if you want to put size on, you need to start taking this supplement, and you need to start doing these weights, and straight after training you need to think of your recovery. And it was a massive eye opener, because I'd never had that before. I just thought it was about the rugby, but it was like, wow, so there's so much more to this rugby, like to become a top player. It's not just about what you do on the field, it was like the off-field stuff. So that academy setup that we had at Warrington, we had a really good academy team, by the way. We got to like the academy grand final and stuff, so we had some top players, a lot of lads from Cumbria in it as well. And that put me in a really good stead, that for like getting into the first team.
That's a big difference between professional and amateur, I think, the weight side of things. Because I remember when I went at 16, your weight was basically bench press, curls on a Friday, and that was it. You didn't do legs, you didn't do shoulders, or like that. And then you'd see these fellas and like tackling when you're 16 like a child against someone like yourself, you just felt like you were trying to stop a bus, didn't it? It just felt like there's no way I'll ever be able to tackle that.
It's true. I mean, like, again, going to an academy setup as a full-time academy player, like all my weight sessions changed. So I was training like a bodybuilder before, and it wasn't really benefiting me that much for rugby. But then they started giving you more sport-specific weights, and there was some element of bodybuilding in there, but it was about being explosive and powerful. And I was just going to say before that, like, it put me in good stead with the academy, because I saw what it needed to be as a professional athlete. But I think the academy team at that time were more professional than the first team at Warrington, because they weren't particularly doing that well, but we was like winning the league, getting to academy grand finals and stuff, and we did everything pretty spot on. We were switched on as a young group.
You said about the academy, like, so how old are the lads in the academy? Are they like 16 years of age?
Yeah, 16 up until you're round about 18. Yeah.
So the lads who are being signed at 13 or 14, like, what are they doing? Are they just doing a little bit of training, but they're literally just like, it's just to keep them there until they're ready, and then like, so they're just playing for the local side, but they're under contract at that club.
Yeah. So if I go back so I signed in '99, but some lads were signing in 95, 96 when they were like 12, 13 years of age. At that time, there were no scholarships, so what they used to do is sign kids on a professional contract. They'd probably like invite them to a couple of games a season, and then they'd give them like a signing on fee on every birthday, and then maybe do a couple of training sessions with them. But they just wanted them players. So what they were trying to do is just sign as many players. If we sign 10 players and we get 2 players out of it who plays first team, then it's sort of a success story. No, it's completely changed. They've created these scholarships where there's some positives to it, but I believe there's some negatives as well, where they sign players and they basically train every single week, so they can actually keep an eye on the development of them, really.
Was it tough when you started making that transaction from the academy to the first team, especially being a forward? Like, I didn't get anywhere in my career, but being on the wing and that, you're sort of out the way, but in the forwards, you're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've just been speaking about Neil Baines. I mean, Neil Baines was a big lad as a forward, and my second Super League game, so I made my debut at Wakefield, and then my second game was the week after against Salford. It was the last game of the season at Wilderspool, and Neil Baines was packing down against me. I was 13.5 stone, and he was about 20 stone. Yeah. So packing down against him, and I was like, and he kept running at me all the time. And to be fair, I held my own. I didn't miss a tackle, and I did all right. And I think them 2 games, because I was lightweight, I didn't fill out until I got probably up until I was about 20, 21 years of age. I just sort of had a pre-season where I just put weight on. I was hammering at gym, I was taking my supplements. But going back to my debut and my second game there, I was lightweight, but I got stuck in. I didn't miss any tackles. I was making yards. I was getting quick play of the balls. And my coach liked that, because he's like, if you can just put a bit of size on, you'll be great for us. You'll be a good asset. So, that was my mission. That was probably my hardest thing to do, really, put weight on.
But Neil Baines probably one of the hardest people to tackle as well, wasn't he? Because he's 20 stone, but he's as fast as a winger. At the time, wasn't he? And I remember he played for Whitehaven. They played Gateshead away. I think he bumped the whole team off twice. Do you know what I mean? Everyone bumped him. Another goal bumped him all off. So he's not the easiest person to tackle in the world.
You couldn't wrap your arms around him. No. And every time you tried to tackle him, he'd try and get an offload. He was such a difficult guy, and like you say, he was explosive for his size. So that transition from academy to first team, that's again more hunger comes in because you're like, shit, I've got to catch up now. You know, I've got to do more work. I've got to work hard. I'm working as hard as I can now, but I need to step it up a little bit more.
But you had some great players at Warrington at the time. There was like Paul Sculthorpe was knocking around then, wasn't he? Or maybe just went, and Lee Breeze and people like that. Did that make it easier? I know we talked to Lee Breeze. He said he was a bit of a rascal at the start of his career. So did that help you, or did interfere really?
It's a nice term for Breezy, that. Breezy. I mean, Breezy's one of my best friends from rugby, and you know, Lee's about 2 or 3 years older than me, but he always looked after me from coming in.
Yeah.
So he was great, and I played all my career with Lee. Having players like him around. We had Alfie Langer at the time. Again, great with the young lads. Andrew G, Tuora Nico. Even though they weren't the best performances of the career playing for Warrington, what they were good with was with the young lads. They loved to see the young lads push themselves. Another one was Gary Mercer. Again, he was coming to the end of his career, signed for Warrington, but Gary had played for New Zealand, and he'd played at the top level for Leeds, Halifax. He'd won Challenge Cups, and he was a very, very tough competitor, but he took the youngsters under his wing, so it were quite good in that respect. We had some really good guys. I think those guys at the time just wanted you to see you work hard, and that were my biggest asset really. It would just work hard, because I always say, I don't think I was I know I weren't the most skillful player, but I'd work as hard as I can, and they love that aspect of it.
It's good with having the older players as well, because you learn off them, don't you? I remember when I think it was 16, I played first team, earphones on, I had Top Gun on, Rocky, and I was like dancing that and looking on. I was the only person doing that. I thought, you can't act like this. Do you know what I mean? Like, you start thinking, oh, this isn't very professional and stuff like that. And you learn little bits, don't you? Think, this is what he does before a match. He doesn't do that. And
you're right. I mean, you're looking about changing rooms, and it is a different experience. And like, you've got academy lads who, look, there were academy lads who were better players than me, but I would say they didn't have like the right mentality in the professional changing room. So although they could they'd have their own preparation and act daft in the changing room, they didn't have a professional element. But it was okay at academy level because you could get away with it. When you go into a first team environment, everybody's switched on. Do you know what I mean? And they're like, everybody has their own way of preparing, but you can just see that they're thinking about the game. They're switched on and they're getting ready for the next 80 minutes. And that's one of the things I learned early, is that when you're in that changing rooms, you have got to be thinking about that game, and you've got to be switched on. You can't be talking about where we're going out after the game, going in a couple of beers like you can in academy. You get away with it in academy and still have a decent game, but first team you can't. Although some conversations did go like that, even first team.
I was just about to say, because for all the stories I've heard, it's always like game over, change, shower, and then straight out on the piss, and then it's like 15 pints and a couple of fights later. And it's just...
it is like, I mean, again, I remember debuting in 2000, completely different atmosphere and culture in 2000 up until, and then 2010 came. It started becoming a little bit more. Not just at Warrington, throughout Super League, more professional, because they started doing cryotherapy recovery. They started looking at alcohol intake and what effect it had on injuries, and how much sleep you had. So we had sleep coaches coming in, hydration tests. There was everything coming in. So you knew that if you went out on the piss and you acted like George Best, you're not going to last as long. If you wanted a prolonged career, you had to curb that a little bit.
Do you think that's improved the games as spectacles? Like, because we've had this discussion with other people like so Lee Breeze and stuff. So that there's not many Mavericks left in the game now, and as just like.
It has become a bit more robotic.
Every player is almost a carbon copy of this. I know, like you've said this, that like they just complete the sets like time and time again, and it's like, so it is literally now just you've got to be bigger, quicker, and stronger, and if every team plays the same way, like so. I don't know, players aren't getting as many injuries, but I don't think it's improved the game as a spectacle.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think there's an element of, I still think there's characters in the game, but I just think that's an element of coaching as well, how the players are coached now, because I feel like there's probably a little bit more free rein in going back, if you went back 20 years and you watch Wigan in the older days, I think there's an aspect to that where defences have got better, so now completion rates are probably a little bit more, viable to win in a match. But there's that many stats now coming through rugby league and saying, oh well, if you've got an high completion rate, you're like more likely to win a game, and if you kick the ball and it doesn't go dead, you're more likely to win a game and have more possession of the ball and stuff. And there's that many statistics coming out. I think it's dumbed the game down a little bit, but I also think the rule changes in rugby league, that has taken the characters out of the game as well. Players are probably a little bit more fearful of making a mistake now than they was years ago.
Well, defences, you'll remember when you last played, in training, I'd say about 8% of that training's defence, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's where the game's gone. So everyone's brilliant at defence. That defence is unbelievable. If you're a neutral tuning in, you're not bothered about that guy who hasn't lost his hips in defence, are you? You want to pick up breaking the line, shoulder barges and things like that. You look on YouTube, your fight, if you have a look on, it's had a lot of views.
I wouldn't call it a fight.
Well,
I think I got hammered in it more than...
You put best try, 1,000 views, fight, 2 million views, and it's weird. And I think if rugby league just realise, people like, not the violence, it's hard to say the violence, but the roughness of the sport is what people love. And they should just be pushing that a bit more, bring the shoulder barge back and feel it. But I just think it'd make it a bit better to watch.
I can't disagree with you. I mean, and I always say there's an element of player welfare now, and there's all this thing going around at the minute regarding head injuries, and the rugby union player's just been diagnosed with dementia at 41. Early signs of dementia.
Steve Thompson.
Yeah, that's the guy, and so there's a lot of that coming in now, and there's player welfare and stuff. But unfortunately for rugby league, it's taken away a lot of the passion that the fans want to see. And you're right, I was having this conversation with Fitzer, the CEO at Warrington Wolves, about 3 or 4 months ago, and we was talking about the most watched clip on YouTube in rugby league terms, and it's not the best tries. It's Ben Flower punching somebody in a grand final and getting sent off after 2 minutes, and that's because people do like to see that element of the game. Look at ice hockey. Who goes to ice hockey to watch ice hockey? I'm sure they just go to watch a fight. But MMA, boxing, all these contact sports, there is that gladiatorial feel around them, and that's what draws the spectators in. They like to see that, because I think a lot of people who sit there and watch it don't want to do it themselves, so they want other people to do it and they get a buzz out of it. Yeah. But I do agree. I think bringing the shoulder charge back, and just sometimes if there's a fight, then you just penalise them, and you don't send them off, and there's people getting banned now for like 5 or 6 games because they've thrown a punch, and it's just silly, because that's what our game's about. And if we want to kid ourselves and start saying that, play well for this, play well for that, unfortunately, I just think that the game's just going to slowly just decrease. There's player welfare and there's player welfare, and I think sometimes we just maybe go a little bit too extreme with it.
Well, I think rugby union with the head injuries, it's because of the rucks. If you look at rugby union teams in the 90s, they look like a pub team, don't they? Just walked off. They were hitting the rucks or half bending over there, putting their hands in ways. Now you've got real athletes, full-time athletes doing that at the ruck, and I don't know if you played union, you get in one of them rucks, it's horrendous. It's like being in a washing machine, and knees, elbows and stuff like that. Whereas league, I get you've got to look after the players, but I don't think it's as bad as rugby union, the impact. It's just the tackle, isn't it? You're not having, like at a ruck, it's head-to-head, whereas I think rugby league, you could get away with a shoulder barge. As long as you're not coming in with the elbow, get banned. But if you're still in the old school shoulder barge...
Things never go back, though, are they? They're never going to bring that back. If they've got any evidence, at all, to support the fact that it's dangerous for players, they're never going to bring it back, are they? It's highly unlikely.
Well, it's interesting that we talk about head injuries in rugby league, but then you've got a sport like boxing and MMA where they get a lot more head contacts. But I'd like to see the research coming from that, really, because I would say that boxers, because of the way that they train and the sparring and the fighting, take a lot more head impacts than rugby league players. So I don't know. I sort of think we're getting a little bit hung up on head injuries, but I haven't seen the research, so it's hard for me to comment. But if I was to make a guess at it, that boxing would be certainly a lot more severe than rugby league. Yeah. I get that rugby's become a massive impact sport because the athletes have got better, but how many head contacts do we actually take during a game? I'm not sure, full head contacts. But, the shoulder barge, bring it back. But if there's shoulder contact made with the head, then it's banned. But that's up to a referee to get in position and judge that call.
And say with the head injuries, I don't mind that where they come off, when they've got a bad head injury. Because used to, back in the day, I'd say about 15, if you got knocked out, if Paul come off in a bit days, like, how about Paul? Do you want a hanky? Do you want a crack? He's still back on, whereas now it's a bit more like Paul maybe in some serious problems there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to Lee Breers, I remember when Lee Breers got knocked out on one of the games and physio come running on and he was out cold on the floor, and when he woke up, doctor said to him, do you know where you are? And he said no, and a message went up to Paul Cullen and said he doesn't know who he is, and he said, well, tell him he's Ellery Handler. So you can have that.
But I don't know, like that bit's good, but the rough side of things, it's just got to come back a little bit. And there's like, if I was marketing rugby league, I'll do an advert and it'd be all the biggest hits, the best shot. Like the best thing that's come in recently, rugby league, I think, is that try in the corner, with the splash in the corner. Modern rugby league, that's made it miles better, hasn't it? Winners scoring them tries. But a lot of the other things, I just think, same with like how they do defence. Lee Breers said, what about you can only have 2 people in the tackle or 1 person in the tackle, so you can't get these 4 people peeling in and stuff like that, just to make it a bit more of an open game and things like that. But that's just me from like a back's perspective. Some people might prefer the defence side of things, but
yeah, I mean, as a forward, you want to get involved in the defence. I mean, the wingers and centres love scoring tries and they celebrate that. But like as a forward, if you're in the middle of the field, if there's 3 or 4 of you in a tackle and you're dragging a player back and you're actually making yards while you're defending, that's like scoring a try for a forward. So it's, you celebrate that aspect of it. But so it's hard to, make changes around that, I think. But yeah, I don't know, I think we need to bring a little bit of brutality back, unfortunately. But I can say that because I'm not playing anymore.
I want to see players getting speared again. Like when just get bang.
Well, I don't want to see that, but yeah, I know what you mean. I do wince when I see people getting, spear tackled and stuff. I mean, that's
they're more dangerous than the shoulder barge, aren't they? Anything like that, anything above vertical, that should be off.
Yeah, I mean, so some nasty tackles been in the past where players you can watch back now to games in the 90s and think, wow, that guy's been lucky to get up.
Well, I used to watch it when I grew up, like Barry McDermott and Stu Field and people like that. You'd have you think, oh, there's their hard bastard on that team, there's their hard bastard, and as fans you knew they're going to have a rumble, like it was just coming, do you know what I mean? People looking forward to that as much as the game, wasn't it? And I think that was the aspect when I was little, oh my god, this is amazing. Like Barry McDermott, you could see him like winding it up and off the field, it's probably the nicest guy you've ever met.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, the characters that are on the field are different off it, and I think we need to bring more of that back. And when we were speaking about characters, I do think there's still characters in the game, but are they dumbed down a little bit because there's that many cameras on them in a game now? You make one mistake, you throw a punch, you might get away with it in that game, but then you're gone for like 2 or 3 weeks because it's been watched again, reviewed, picked up, then you're at the disciplinary. So if Barry McDermott were playing now, you wouldn't see him because he'd just be off the field constantly. But he was one of my idols, Barry McDermott. You know what I mean? I remember him playing for Wigan. He came, he had one eye. He was just like taking people's heads off. I'm like, I love this guy. You know what I mean? As a 12-year-old kid, you just love that. Yeah. And but we don't have that sort of same ferocity, really. You watch Adrian Morley when he flies in and elbows Mick Cassidy at Central Park. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's watched and people enjoy that aspect of it. We shouldn't be hitting people around the head with elbows or shoulders, but we need to bring a little bit more.
That's what I mean. It's hard to say exactly what you want. It's like a fine line, isn't it? It's like you watch them Kelvin Skerritt highlights. Like Kelvin Skerritt looked like his wife just left him before he went on the field every time. He was a maniac, wasn't he? And you watch them clips, but how many people are watching them clips? You look online and think, oh, too many people watch Kelvin Skerritt take someone's head off. Or
I mean, I remember being at Central Park when the old Super Kel, they called him for after it, but being at Central Park and a big fight broke out. Kelvin Skerritt come running from the other side of the field and jumped over all the players and just like landed in the middle of them and started throwing punches, and then they got nicknamed Super Kel. But he must have been one of the angriest guys before the match because when I was 12, I played for my school at Central Park, and we got fortunate enough that our own changing room was the Wigan Warriors changing room. So we all got our bags, and I put my bag in my place. And when I looked, it said, "This is Kelvin Skerritt's place, fuck off." So I was like, I'm in Kelvin Skerritt's place, but don't fucking sell him. Like, so he must have been an angry guy to write that on his...
Well, I remember playing with, can you remember Matt Stern?
Yeah, Matty Stern, yeah.
Well, he couldn't wait even, and I think I was only like 16, no one else available, so I got picked, literally, they couldn't find anyone, so I was playing. And I can remember I was like in a top, and I'm sure it was like top for someone who was obviously well big. I look like the end of Big, you know, if you Google my name on Google, I'm like that in a top, like triple XL, so I'm there. And he's just banging the ball in his face. I can remember thinking, oh my God. And he's on my team. And I was like, oh my God, what is wrong with him? And it's weird, the fear factor, isn't it? Like, some people just have that where you're on the field and think, not going near that. I don't want that in my life. Do you know what I mean?
It's different mentality from a back to a forward, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, say, you were talking earlier about, you know, maybe just having two people in a tackle. Well, you know, as a forward, you celebrate defence. You know, you don't score many tries. When you do, you celebrate them. But our thing is, we want to hurt people in defence. We want to make yards in defence.
See, this is why I never bothered playing rugby. The fact that I was shit at it.
But it's, the stats though are misleading, I think, with the defence in rugby league. And I think more players are learning in rugby league how to get a tackle. Like, just say someone's getting tackled there. If I go, that counts as a tackle for me.
Yeah.
So if you're in the middle, you could be like, oh, there we go, another one. Because I learned that. I think they've done it right. I had 12 tackles for. I've never tackled 12 people in the season, never mind. And it was literally because people got tackled and I thought, well, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's a bit misleading, is it, some of the stats?
Yeah, I mean, and as rugby players, you know, obviously we speak about other teams and other players, and you know that's recognised by some of the, you know, if someone's playing on Sky and you're watching it because you train it next day, so you sat watching Sky and the game's on, and it comes up, someone's made 56 tackles, you know, players will come in next day and say, yeah, he made 56 tackles, but like 20 of them were just a lie on, you know what I mean? Yeah. So you're right, with the stats sometimes, if they just touch them, you know, I think like, when you look at James Roby, he makes like 56 tackles in a game, but the 56 tackles, because unfortunately James Roby just gets targeted and people run at him because they want to sap his energy, so he's not got it with the ball. So like someone like a James Roby does make 56 tackles and the 56 tackles, but I think if, like, going back to Breezy, if he made 30 tackles, 29 were just touching someone and one of them was probably a full-on tackle, so the halfbacks don't get involved as much in that.
But speaking of tough players yourself, in the grand final, about carrying on, like how to promote a game, like you carried on after ruptured, what was the injury that you had? What was it?
It was ruptured testicle.
Testicle. Like he follows football. Like imagine in football, Ronaldo, he'd probably start crying for about 3 weeks. Do you know what I mean? He'd be crying for 3 weeks. He wouldn't even walk for about 4 months.
If I flicked you in the nuts now, it hurt for about half an hour.
Football, I don't know how many rolls they'd be doing. They'd probably roll on the pitch for about 3 months. You've done that and carried on playing. Do you know, like, I just think that's the best thing about rugby league, how tough the people are that play the sport.
Yeah, people always say, how did you carry on playing? But at the end of the day, it was a grand final. It was my first grand final appearance as well, at a club where I'd spent at that time 12 years of my life. Biggest game of my career, in a grand final aspect. I were never coming off that field. If that same injury would have happened at Wakefield in a regular Super League game, I'd have probably come off. You know, so I don't think there was any element of toughness in it from my point of view. I just think there was that much adrenaline pumping around me. It's a grand final. Was in a good position to win it. Unfortunately, we lost it, but it felt like we were going to win that grand final. I think we were leading at the time, but I were never coming off that field. You know, they had to drag me off to get me to come off, but you know, injuries just part and parcel of the game. It's one thing what's I've never really been that bothered about physical injuries, because it just happens. I always knew once I step over that line, them injuries are going to come. You know, I think I worked it out after I'd finished playing. I'd had 15 operations from playing rugby, and it's like, wow, you know, that's putting your body through some turmoil. But then I'd do it all again, because I'd only, you know, that's what you sign up to, unfortunately. You know, when you're playing against big, tough lads who I want to work them, but they want to work me as well. And I'm not saying any of them injuries were malicious, but, they're flying into me and I'm flying into them, and over time it's going to create injuries. So, it's just part and parcel of it for me.
Did you know that you'd done some serious damage when you done it?
Oh yeah, I knew. Yeah, I knew. I started speaking like Joe Pasquale. No, I remember exactly how it happened. I mean, it was the second half, so we'd just gone in for half time. We come out and Leeds were kicking off to us. They kicked off, and I think I was the third carry, and I took the ball in, and I think it was Callum Watkins, unintentionally, but he kneed me in my groin, and I felt it. And like I say, when you flick your nut, like it hurts. You get that belly ache.
Yeah. Well, it's the stomach more than anything.
Yeah. I had that, and I stayed down, and the physio came on, and he's like putting water on. I'm like, that's going to do fuck all. I said, this is sore, but it's like, did he come off? I'm like, no, just leave me on. I'll be all right. I'll run it off. And long story short, he came in, checked me a few times. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm all right. When I came off, I did 25 minutes, and then they replaced me with Adrian Morley. Oh no, sorry, they replaced me with, I think it might have been Mike Cooper. And anyway, I sat down next to Adrian Morley, and he said, are you all right, can you go back? I said, yeah. I said, I'm fine. I said, but that doesn't look so good, does it? And when I looked, my testicle was like that. And he said, fucking hell, he said, you better get that sorted. So anyway, again, adrenaline was pumping through, so we got our medals, our losers' medals. We watched Leeds lift the trophy, and then we all went in the changing rooms, took my kit off, and just in the shower I was like cramping over. I said, Doc, I've done something here. So luckily, Chris Brooks as well, who was the Great Britain doctor, he was covering that game. He looked at it and he went, you're going straight to hospital here. He said, you've ruptured that. That's going to have to come out. Like, fuck me. So... I was just doubled over then in a car. Rachel, the girl at Warrington, she was the media manager then at the time. She drove me to Salford Hospital. They got me straight in and just went, right, you're having an operation that's coming straight out. So it was like really big at the time. And I thought, fuck me, I'm missing end of season piss up now. So I got it. But that was that. But I did gut Magaluf about 4 days later. So I went in hospital, had my operation, and I would boot Magaluf for end of season trip. And they was all like, oh, you're not coming now? I said, fucking dead right, I'm coming. I said, I'll be there, don't worry. So I went Magaluf 4 days later, it was great.
But you were everywhere after. I can remember you were popping up on like TV shows, in papers and things like that. It just, obviously a terrible injury, but it put you on a national stage, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, mate, it was everywhere. I've never known exposure like it for rugby league because, I mean, to say we lost that grand final, that sort of overshadowed Leeds winning the grand final, and I was on everything. I mean, I was even a question on £1 Million Drop. You know what I mean? So yeah, there was a game show on Channel 4. You sat there watching it. Paul Wood sustained an injury. Blah blah blah. This question was, what was it? I know one of the answers was, well, obviously one of the answers was because he ruptured a testicle. One of the answers was he took Viagra before a game, and something like that. They're like dead mad answers. Anyway, they got it right. This couple was like made up. They knew who I was, so they put all the money onto it and won. But yeah, I was on everything, and my mate like did a scrapbook for me. And saying before, it was in like Africa, Afghanistan. Like, I didn't even know they had papers in Afghanistan, and he's bringing this thing right.
In between wars, just having a read.
Yeah, Polish papers, like Russian papers. I've still got it at home. It's a clippings book, and there's just loads of newspaper articles. I was on New York radio stations, everything. It just absolutely blew up. I couldn't believe it, how much press it was getting, really. So yeah, it was a big thing.
But it's like a double-edged sword, because off the field things weren't going quite as well, whether it was on the field. Rugby league's one of them. They're really good with rugby league cares and stuff like that. When did you start realising you had problems off the field?
I always have. I always have. I mean, that was sort of like just a catalyst to. I sustained the injury, and then I had some personal life trouble in the off season and during pre-season. But everyone always sort of thinks it comes from that injury, and my life went into turmoil. It wasn't from that at all. I'd had troubles before that. That was just sort of just coincide by coincidence that injury at the time happened. I was sort of in the press a lot and doing a lot of interviews and stuff. And then, some stuff come out about my personal life.
How hard was that to deal with at the time? Because I think rugby league's, in a way, it's lucky because the players aren't under that telescope either. Do you know what I mean? Like, if people knew what lads were doing in Super League, they would have an angina attack, wouldn't they? Do you know what I mean? Whereas you were thrust into that line, like, everyone knew about your personal business. How hard was that to deal with?
It was hard because when you're in a rugby league's a community, and that's players, coaches, fans, people in the press. There's no one really looking for, that hard story. They're not trying to do you, but what I found hard is that there was reporters out there who were telling lies and putting things in the paper what weren't true. And they weren't rugby league reporters, these were like proper press reporters who were trying to sort of make a story. And I found that very difficult because when I was reading stuff that weren't true, I didn't want everybody else to believe it as well. So that was quite hard to deal with. Like I say, you trust the rugby journalist, with your life, but you only need to say one thing to, well, I don't know whether you'd call them a normal journalist or, someone who's trying to report a story. You've got to really watch what you're saying, and that was a massive learning curve. And I remember when that injury happened, the press conference for the first game of the season, they chose me to do it. This is 3 or 4 months after the grand final, and there was a couple of reporters there who I wouldn't really class them as rugby league journalists, but they were journalists, and they was in there and they were really trying to get me to say something so they could put it in the paper, and I just refused. I just didn't want to answer the questions. So that was a massive learning curve for me. Massive, yeah.
How low did you get in that season? Because rugby league cares, and there's a lot of lads watching it, and I think with rugby league we've always got that front on. I'm doing like, you're a rugby lad, you look as hard as they come, don't you? Do you know what I mean? No one's expecting someone like you to have like problems, I think, off the field. And we talked to Francis Maloney, was the same, and he said like he'd win a match and then he'd go and cry.
Yeah.
He said there was no reason. He said he had money in the bank, everyone thought it was great, scoring tries, but he said there was just something wrong, and he said he didn't know how to deal with it.
No, I know. I can relate a lot to what Francis says, and I've spoke to him, and great player in his day, Francis. He achieved a lot in the game, and it's. So I get it. He's seen as a successful rugby league player, but no one thinks you've got problems. It's not just me, or Since I've come away from rugby, I speak to a lot of guys in the game who are going through issues, and I speak to a lot of guys who have finished playing, and it's whether they're struggling with transition from playing to a real working world, completely different environment, whether the addicts in drink, drugs, prescription drugs, gambling. It seems like it's not just rugby league. It's sport in general is there's a pandemic, so to speak, to use that word, but there's a lot of issues within sport. I don't know whether sports people are just sort of. I think you have to be a little bit daft anyway, play rugby league. I generally think you're not wired up right to want to do this for 20 years. You know what I mean? It's like normal people. I always think if they have one operation because they're through an occupational hazard, they'd probably stop. But we just want to carry on and bust ourselves up even more. But we're extremists, I think. I'm saying we, not we. I'm an extremist. I'll go to extremes with a lot of things, but there's a sort of a bit of a pattern with the people who I speak to that are not involved in the game. Some are still involved in the game, and they have troubles, they do. It's not, your life's not rosy just because you're playing professional sport. It's not.
But prescription drugs, they're bad, aren't they, in rugby league? Because you get advice like, oh, have you got a bad knee? Mix these with these, and you won't feel it. You think, oh, don't feel my knee, or my face. Do you know what I mean? Like, you think there's a double-edged sword, and the next day you think, oh, I slept for 28 hours. You know what I mean? Like, the side effects from everything you're putting in your body. And I think when you're a young lad, you just want to get on the field, don't you? Think, oh, these help me get through. And the amount of players I know, like, when they finish, like, oh, I just need these to get up. You're like, you need co-cordamals in the morning. You know what I mean? Like, you just think, this isn't a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, I think, for me, playing sport, I could justify taking 8 tramadol in the morning. Now, I don't need 8 tramadol because 2's enough, but I'd take 8. Do you know what I mean? And I could justify it because I'd say, well, I played rugby today and I'm stiff and I'm sore, but that's justifying it because I played rugby. I shouldn't have been able to, do you know what I mean? So in some respects, sport can sort of enable you to do that type of behaviour. So it's massive. The prescription drug scene is massive, and I think, do you know what? I think, going back to what I said earlier, I don't know whether it is or not, but there's an element of the drinking side has sort of been cut a little bit. So then players start looking for other avenues how to feel good. So if your coach says, "Look, we've got 3 big games coming up this week, and we're going to make a pact as a team that we're not going to drink for 3 weeks," and some lads find that hard to do, and your coach says, "But I'm going to breathalyse you every morning or every Monday," then what lads will do is they'll look for something else to take. So if I breathalyse you but you've had 8 tramadol, you're passing a breathalyser test.
Yeah.
No one knows any different. If you have a Zopiclone or a diazepam, you're still passing an alcohol test. Yeah. So lads are always looking for something to make them feel a little bit different. And it is a common thing in rugby league. I know because I speak to people. I speak to people about it and I try and give them advice and help on it. So I know that it's there. But it's not everybody. There's some very, very sensible guys involved in the game.
The mentality of that, do you think that's like almost because you're on such a high, like as you say, the adrenaline's like kicking in when you're actually playing. So to then come down, your Monday to Friday, and it's a bit of a come down. Like, so is that just like trying to replicate the buzz that you get, like, because it seems to be a thing with, as you say, the gambling, the drink, and the going out the lifestyle. So, it must be something to do with the fact that you've got this massive buzz of a weekend, and then kind of just like going back to
sport, isn't it? I think
to a normal, that like
I mean, Ricky Hatton and all these people. I remember talking, Ricky said you go from 80,000 in the arena or 60,000, whatever's in the arena, and then you're in a supermarket on a Tuesday. So it was just too much of a high, then low and stuff, and trying to deal with that, trying to be more of a balance. And that's rugby league. I think a lot of lads in rugby league struggle from Super League because 1 minute getting quite a good wage, everyone's wanting their autograph, and rugby league's one of them. When you fall off that cliff, it's gone, isn't it? You know what I mean? You're right in there. Probably don't have that many qualifications. Your job's going to pay maybe a quarter of what it used to. And a lot of lads aren't prepared for that, I don't think.
No, there's not. I mean, there's different elements to this. So, when you're still playing, you ask the question, why do people take prescription drugs? And I can only speak for myself, but I generally think because lads are putting themselves under that much pressure during the week to perform well. One, because they want to do it for themselves, and 2, they don't want to, get deselected from the team. So to take a little bit of pressure off, some people can have 1 or 2 pints and do that. Well, if you can't drink, then what do you do then? Then you want to quieten your head down. You want to take that stress off that you've created all week. You take some prescription drugs and it helps. I think when lads finish playing, sometimes that taking them while they're playing then, changes to addiction because they sort of struggle with the transition phase, or they start taking 1 or 2 prescription drugs while they're playing, then it goes to 3 or 4, 5, 6, then they become dependent on them, so they have to take them, and then that's where the addiction starts. So there's a vast array of reasons why I think people take prescription drugs, but if I was to have a guess at why people do it generally after a game, it's because they want to switch their head off. They sort of put themselves under so much pressure and stress and done everything right through the week, and it's constantly in your head, rugby league, because you don't switch off from it. Even when you come home and you're having your tea, you're still thinking about your rugby for the majority of players. So I think the prescription drugs is just a way of just switching their head off, and they're not at that specific time. It just, I feel good now. I'm not thinking about it. I'm just chill. I'm enjoying myself, and that's one of the main reasons I feel that people do it. Some people will drink. Some people will choose gambling. There's a vast array of things that people choose to make themselves think different, or to switch the head off.
Well, drink's one of them, isn't it, in rugby? It's like 50% of the team are the ones I used to envy. They'd be the ones that can have 4 pints, message a bird, drink a Chinese, and then you've got the other ones that have 4 pints, they're in Pop World, 3:30 in the morning, and you just don't seem to have that middle ground, is there? There's no, I used to just envy them people that can just have 3 or 4 pints and go home. Whereas if you were like one of them that drinks a lot...
can't do that.
That's what I mean. I used to think you're mature, but you just don't.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I mean, I stopped drinking about 5.5 years ago, so I don't touch a drop now because I'm like I was saying earlier, I'm an extremist. So if I'm out, I'm out. I've done everything to try and curb my drinking. I go out with my 65-year-old, or he was 65 at the time, father-in-law, take him to Weatherspoons. Well, I'll be all right with him. I'm not going to stay out if I'm with him. I'm in Weatherspoons, and then he'd go home, and then I'd be in a lap dancing club till like 5 o'clock in the morning, and then staggering in at 8 in the morning, and it's like, this is not normal behaviour.
It's weird what you try though, isn't it? I can remember going out in shit clothes. So it'd be like a Sunday afternoon, I wouldn't go being seen dead in these because you think, now I'm in a nightclub in shit clothes. Do you know what I mean? There's no you think I've got my dad's shoes, you know what I mean? The weird things you try to curb it, isn't it? And you think, I'm going to write on my hand, be home at this time, daft stuff like that. And you think, put an alarm on your clock and you're like, that doesn't work, that's off. You know what I mean?
Well, I when I stopped drinking, I'd not had a drink for a couple of years, and then we had this cupboard under the stairs, so we're sorting through it and pulled these shoes out, brown shoes, and they were I'm talking disgusting brown shoes, and they'd been in there about 2 years. And what it were, my wife was telling me the story. She said, yeah, what it were, you went out to the pub and you said, I'll wear my Converse because I can't get into pubs or clubs with Converse on, so I'll not go out with my shoes on, so I know I'll definitely be coming home before 11. And she said, you just found some homeless guy and give him your brand new Converse and swap shoes with him so he could get in a nightclub. And that's the stuff that I'd sort of do just to stay out. And these shoes, mate, were disgusting. I mean, disgusting. And but that just for me, drinking, it's just not good for me. And mate, there's that many rugby players who can't control drink, prescriptions. There's loads of it going on. It's not everybody, Luke, don't get me wrong, it's not everybody, but there is a bit of an issue with it at the minute. There is, there's a lot of help out there if the lads want it. You just said, Rugby League Curse does a great job. Tony Adams with the Sporting Chance Clinic, he puts numerous sports people through, not just sports people, through his clinic, because, there's an issue with it. I think it's too readily available as well. It's easy to get. Yeah. So...
How hard was it for you to retire? Because I know you come out of retirement a couple of times. Because I was saying, and if you play rugby and stuff like that on a Friday, Super League's on, and if you've had a few drinks, you forget the injuries a lot bit, don't you? And I can imagine someone like yourself thinking, I've got this. Do you know that I can still do this? Get the boots, and you know what I mean? Have you done that? Is it been hard for you for the last couple of years? Because I know for a fact you could go to National League One easy and just say, yeah, I'll come and do it and make decent money. Has it been hard just to keep off the field?
Yeah, it was. So I retired in 2015. I played at Featherstone, and I retired in 2015, and then I went coaching at Leeds Centurions for 3 years. But during that time, I went back. I always wanted to finish my amateur career at my old club in St Williams. So I went there and played there for the season. And I've had this thing where I've said I've had enough of rugby league. I just want to watch it, and I always get drawn back in somewhere. So I stepped away from Leeds Centurions because I'd sort of just fell out of love with the game, and I didn't have the dedication for it. And then all of a sudden I get asked to go on Rugby AM, so I'm involved in rugby again, and then I sort of take a step back from that, and then I'm coaching Ashton Burr's rugby league team now, just down the road. So I always keep getting drawn back in, and when Whitehaven was struggling, actually, my friend was going to take over. A guy, Stuart Harvey, he was determined to take the club over, and he said, would you play, because there's no money whatsoever, but would you play for them to help them out? And I went, yeah, I'll definitely play. So I was going to go to Whitehaven. That never came off. So I played in a charity game. It was Lancashire versus Yorkshire, and in the charity game I did 80 minutes, and Stuart Littler was one of the back rowers in the team, and he said, you could still do a job for us at Swinton. So I went back to Swinton in 2018, played 4 games, went to Barra, did my rib cartilage. I was working for myself and I thought, this is no good for me because I couldn't do my job proper. So, now I know that I'm definitely done, definitely.
Before we finish, because I know you've got to go, Lee have got into Super League. We've talked about how rugby league can make it better. And John Duffy, great coach, great bloke. I think the owner at Leeds, is it Beaumont?
Yeah, David Beaumont.
He seems like a great bloke. Like everyone at Leeds, brilliant. But it seems like an odd decision when all the talk about we need expansion, we want Toronto, and that, and you've got Lee, and I say you could throw a stone to 4 of the Super League clubs. Do you know what I mean? Like you couldn't get any closer to the other teams, could you? Like, do you think that's a good decision by rugby league?
I'm not sure. I mean, my take on rugby league at the minute as a fan, because that's all I am. I'm just a rugby league fan. I would have liked to see like York to come in.
Yeah.
Someone like that. Because my theory on that is, and I know people will say, well, York are unproven and whatnot, but I just think taking our game to like bigger cities. So you look at someone like Lee, who's got a population of 41,000 people. How much bigger can their fan base actually grow?
You need every single person out of town.
You do. You basically need
because they're fighting against Wigan and Saints.
Well, you've got round League, you've got Wigan, Saints, Warrington. You've got quite a number of rugby league clubs around there. So you're basically trying to get 40-50% of that town to come and watch your rugby league club. So my thing is how much bigger can they get as a club now? You look at somebody like York, which is a city, massive tourist destination. They've already got a fan base in there, but they've got 250,000 people to go at. So how much fan base can they grow? Is there more potential in that area? Because let's be honest, York have grown massively over the last 3 years. They've got a good coach, they've got a good team on paper as well. They've just signed some ex-Super League players like Ryan Atkins and Cuthbertson and Danny Kermon. So they're going to have a good team. So this is only my personal opinion, but I would have liked to see someone like York because I can see the bigger picture and the expansion, that potential that is there. And we talk about growing rugby league, but I think at the minute we're only ever going to be an M62 sport. I want to see rugby league players getting paid what they're worth. I want them to get paid more than I got paid, than everybody else is getting paid. Because the majority of them don't. Some people, your marquee signings, they earn good money, don't get me wrong, but I want to see rugby league players getting what they earn. And the only way we can do that is expand the game and take it away from that M62, so to speak. I know York's still in Yorkshire, but for me, there's a massive potential there. So I think from a bigger picture aspect, I would have liked to see York. But Lee are a great club. They're a rugby town. Massive respect for David Beaumont. He's so passionate about the club. I worked at Lee and I've seen how he works for Stan. He loves rugby league. He loves the club. He loves the town. He pumps all his money into the sport. He's rugby league mad. And I know for a fact he wants to walk out at Wembley with Lee, and he will not stop until he does that. So in terms of dedication and motivation, they've got everything they need. But I'll go back to my original point: is how much bigger of a club how much can they do for rugby league as a club now because of the size of the town, So it's a tough one. It really is a tough one, and I can see why Lee got the decision. It's a safe bet. They've got the players. They've got the players, the finances. They've got a stadium. They've got the owner that's going to back them. So there's pros and cons for everything. Do we need to take it to the big cities and try and promote it? Look, we've took it to London and stuff, but how much have we promoted it in London?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, the game's not promoted well enough for me. You don't really hear about it there.
No, that's what Landy's not into rugby. That's why it's good to have someone who's not into it. Where if you're into it, do you not read Rugby League Express? No, I don't. Do you know what I mean? You just assume everyone's watching and reading what you're doing, but from an outsider looking in, everyone knows about MMA. If you don't watch it, you know about it. If you don't watch boxing, you know about boxing. Football, I know football, isn't it? I can't stand it. Do you know what I mean? But you still know about it. Whereas rugby league, you've got to really looked for it, haven't you, to find out what's going on.
That's what I was saying before. It's insular. It's like, as you say, if you're part of it, you'll know everything.
Yeah.
But unless you really, really dive head first into it,
yeah,
it's not Sky Sports, really.
Yeah, I mean, taking your point there, like, I find out stuff about boxing, MMA, different sports. I can find out. For some reason, it's on social media. It's covered. But with rugby league, even though I'm a rugby league fan, I still find it hard to find information unless I go on the Sky Sports Rugby League app. And my lad's massive into rugby league. He's like Warrington's biggest fan now. And he tells me, so if he didn't tell me about rugby league, there's a lot of stuff I wouldn't know. So he's like my Wikipedia really, and he gives me all the information. But in terms of exposure and branding and stuff, it's too... I think, I said it earlier before we even started, we've got this like 80s mentality. We've not moved forward with the times, I don't think. I mean, you can look at some of the social media of some of the Super League clubs and it's absolutely appalling. It's like amateur. It's like someone's just got the mobile phone, took a quick video, used a quick app and then pulled it onto social media.
We have a match on Sunday and then that's it. You're like, is this it? No, like preview, no who's playing, not like that.
I was looking at one yesterday on social media with a spelling mistake. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, someone might say, well, that's not a big deal. Well, it is, because you need to get the little things right.
It's the
to
professionalism
get
of it.
Of course it is, yeah. And it's, even though it's a full-time professional sport, sometimes it's hard to, it doesn't portray itself as that sometimes. So
they need to make the players famous as well, I think. It's like, if you ask someone who's not in rugby, who's the biggest rugby league player, man, they're fired. You know what I mean? They've been going back years, but it's now like a lot of the players now, you don't know what to do off the field, do you? So, for a fact, there's a million characters in rugby league that are crackers, aren't they? Like, if you follow them with the camera, you'd be like...
The only players I know now are the ones that that you tend to find, like, every now and then, like, get into trouble.
Yeah.
Like, they're the only times, like, that I hear rugby league players' names.
Well, what you've just said there, why... is Sean Edwards, Martin Afire, Ellery Hanley, who have not played the game for 25 years, why are they still bigger names in rugby league than the current crop of players that we've got now? And it's like Martin Afire, I think he had his own song out when he was a rugby player, like he's getting exposure for that. He was on Emmerdale Farm, and people just, Wigan were up for team, of the year on Sports
I can remember that when I was little,
people recognise these names. The bigger names now are Sean Edwards, Martin Afire, Ellery Hanley's than any current crop of player we've got. So it's I think you've got Paul Sculthorpe, who's a big name, and you've Adrian Morley, but I think they're like the last big names really. You've got a sort of an household name on it. So other than that, you've not got anything.
But that's what I mean. If you were running rugby league now, we just discussed it. You would say make the players a bit more famous, get them on as many TV programs if you can, things like that. Promote the game a little bit more, like that grand final. One of the best grand finals for years. Yeah. After 2 days, no one talked about it. Do you know what I mean? You had all these famous people going, what the hell is that? But Tony Bellews and all that. They should have jumped on that. Should have done a documentary on James Graham's last appearance. Sean Loughlin followed him with a camera. Like, how much would that cost with a camera? And push that out the week after, like, oh, this was a grand final and things like that. Expand it a bit, because we just talked about Leigh. We've got, like, how many teams within, like, 10 miles of each other?
Yeah.
Get a team in Cumbria.
That's what I
Toulouse, Dry Island. I think, like, I played rugby union in the Scottish Borders. You could get a Super League team out that Scottish Borders, put it like a semi-pro rugby team like they have with Coventry, right in the middle of a rugby union heartland, because they have like 3rd and 4th teams in Scotland. They're just mad on rugby, and expand it that way. Whereas now you're like, they've got Leigh. What's the expansion plan for next year?
Yeah,
where we're going to move it next year? Like, I don't know, Oldham or somewhere like that. And
see, I like the fact that Newcastle have come into the Championship now, because again, Newcastle, big population. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to happen where they can market that team, so to speak. And I'm a genuine believer as well. If clubs are making the fan base purely on the performances on the field, they're missing a trick, because you can't control what your team's going to do on the pitch. Whether you spend a ton of money, you can't guarantee you're going to win every week, and unfortunately not every team can win every week. So if you're relying on your fan base to come to that match purely on whether they win or they lose, you're missing a trick. It's got to be an entertaining day. So I was speaking to Wagger on Wayne Godwin on my podcast the other week, and he was saying he went watching England Rugby Union at Twickenham and never even watched the game.
Yeah.
But he had the best time ever. And that's what we need to do, and that's what I'm saying. We're still in the 80s. You know, rugby clubs still think people come to watch the game, but make it more about what's happening around the game.
Match day experience.
Make the game the pinnacle, but make stuff happen around it. But I don't see any of that now. I can sit here and say that, and it might be easier said than done. You know what I mean? But we need to do something different. We've still got a rugby league mentality. We've still got an 80s mentality in some of the stuff that we do. It needs to grow forward. We need to move with the times. Social media is so big now with these young kids coming through. My lad watches everything on YouTube. He doesn't watch TV. It's YouTube, Instagram, and you know he's 13 years of age. So we need, as clubs and I think as a sport, we need to target that area. It's got to be massive around social media because kids are just like that all the time now, aren't they?
Well, every time you like rugby league now, their idea of advertising or what the game's going to be like, go through, buy a programme, chips, or a burger. that seems to be it. Whereas like Bradford come in, they started putting bands on before the match.
Yeah.
So like if you can bring your girlfriend, if she could, like women maybe not as into it as you, but if they don't mind watching the bands, acts that are on, have a few drinks, there's a gin tent and stuff like that, you double your crowd right off the bat, don't you? So like just having something that women would enjoy as well a bit more. Have like you said about Twickenham, they have like tents on, they have music tents. After the match it's like a DJ and things like that after the ground, so the ground's making money on the drink. You just feel like it wouldn't take that much, would it, to hire a local band to say, oh, we've got 3-4 bands on, what would that be, like 500 quid, DJ on after it? That means you've got like 5,000 or 6,000 people that are going to drink for 4 or 5 hours extra. You're bound to make that back, aren't you? It just seems like little things that would just make it so much better.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, there's got to be like, you know, it's easy for us to sit here and comment and stuff, but I think we can certainly do more. I think, you know, I do hospitality at Warrington on match days, and they're creating a match day experience. It's like you don't just come, pay, and sit down and watch a rugby league game. You know, they have like bits of entertainment on at half time, and it's. Years ago, it used to just be like some kids playing touch rugby on a field. Well, no one watches that unless your kid's playing. Do you know what I mean? So now they have like this wire flyer who's racing people out.
I've seen it, yeah.
It's quite entertaining, and people stay out in the seats and to watch this. And you know they have things going on around the game, and they have the light shows and everything. And it's like pretty cool. Like some of the days I go and I think, you know what, I enjoyed this today. And I don't really particularly watch the game because I'm not that interested. It's my lad who watches it. I tend to like be networking with people who I've not seen for ages, but I still have a good time around it. And I think like to look at the clubs, I think Warrington, I'm not just saying it because I'm ex-Warrington player, I'm saying it because I think they're like a forward-thinking club at the minute. The social media is bang on, the match day experience is getting bang on, they treat the sponsors really good, you know, and it's just a really good club to be involved in, I think.
But that flyer thing at half time, that's a good idea. Like little things like that, they're not hard to do, are they? And
No.
No one's allowed to know who the flyer is, are they?
No.
That's what I mean, right? So it's like, but baseball and that do the exact same thing, don't they? American football. I think I'd just look at another sport and think, oh, they do that. Should we try that? And just keep. It's trial and error, isn't it? Like, oh, that was terrible.
Yeah. And the you know, I know like as a club Warrington, what they'll do is they'll send people over to America to look at these sports and see what they're doing differently and how the marketing and stuff like that. So I have some good conversations with some of the guys involved in the club, and you know, it's interesting how they're sort of being the pioneers and looking at what other sports are doing and what boxing are doing and what MMA are doing, and you know, educating themselves on promoting the game, because that's what we need to do. It's not a case of just I believe it's not just a case of whether the team wins or not. For some fans it is. But fans like myself, you know, I want to go and watch rugby league and be entertained. But, you know, I want to have a good experience when I'm there. I don't go 10 minutes before game, just sit in my seat and be bored out of my head, you know what I mean? So.
Well, like the Rugby League Raw fans.
Yeah.
They were the best fans, weren't they?
Yeah.
I don't know where they found them from, because I used to I watch every week and think, where have they dragged this guy from? He'd have like the buttons on it, and this thing here in 85 years, like that. The loose today, I'm leaving my wife and stuff like that. You think, do you know you're on the camera? Do you know Rugby League Raw? was class. And I don't know why that went away, because I used to watch that every week. The people drunk and they think, should you really be on a camera? And they're just giving it everything, weren't they?
Yeah.
And none of the coaches were surrounded by security, which was the best, wasn't it? So you'd have like people in the crowd and people would come up to them. So you'd like, old one, you need to get him off. He's bloody terrible. Like professional coaching. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think they should go back. It's a mixture of that and bringing it forward, isn't it? Like, keep the old school mentality, but just go with the time slightly, isn't it? But Paul, we've took up enough of your time. I know you've got to get to the gym and things like that. But cheers for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much.
Cheers, pal.
Cheers.